I've been calling Donald Trump a clown, but he's even more like a clown than previously thought. That's right. Donald Trump, at this point, has amounted to just humiliating himself for our own entertainment. And it would be entertaining if, of course, it didn't also mean America was being humiliated. But now things just got worse as Stephen A. Smith confronted Trump on live TV, and it left Trump bumbling over his words and completely panicking. How's it going, everybody? My name is Hunter Avallone with Occupy Democrats. Welcome back to another video. Now, this just happened. Donald Trump did a phone interview live with Bill O'Reilly. There were so many insane comments that Trump made. I think we're just gonna go through the list, And then, of course, we'll take a look at the cringiest one of all, when Stephen Smith confronts Trump. First, Trump was questioned about his terrible poll numbers. His response demonstrates what a delusional narcissist he is.
A series of rough polls this week, and I'm wondering how you process that. Does it hurt your feelings when you see numbers come in that are not what you'd like them to be?
Well, first of all, they're fake polls. And if you take a look at the polls, they interviewed more, and for the most part, they interviewed more Democrats than they did Republicans, which is ridiculous and unfair. And Democrats aren't voting for Trump. And you look at them, John McLaughlin, who's the most respected pollster, said I'm at 50, 55, and maybe even higher than that. And he said that these polls are largely fake. When you look at the New York Times, when you look at the Washington Post, ABC, they predicted I was going to lose Wisconsin by 17 points, and I ended up winning Wisconsin. They predicted I was going to lose the election, and I ended up winning the election. They're fake polls, number one, and I think it's a very important thing to know that and to understand it. And because polls are no different than fake writers or journalism, and it's not a pretty thing when you watch. So when you say,
okay, yeah, they're all fake news, but you know a guy who says you're really good in the polls, actually. Really? Honestly, is anyone supposed to believe this? So that's embarrassing. But it's still not nearly as embarrassing as when Trump was confronted by Stephen Smith. But before that, let's first look at this clip. Trump was confronted about the fact that if he doesn't change things up, the Democrats might win. Trump's answer was basically that he's just going to show everybody that it's really great that prices are going up, that inflation is worse. I don't know.
Look, it's gotta stabilize by this time, fall, because remember, if it doesn't stabilize this time next year, Democrats may win the midterms. So there is risk here, big risk.
That's true. It is true. And I just think that I'll be able to convince people how good this is. This is what other countries have done to us. We've been the laughing stock and the whipping post. We've been ripped off by every country practically in the world.
I like how so far Stephen A. Smith hasn't even asked any questions. He's just kind of politely sitting there. I wonder if he knows that soon enough he's going to ask a question that leaves Trump stunned. We'll take a look at Stephen Smith's confrontation in a second, but first, look at this clip. Trump was asked what he thinks his biggest mistakes were over the past 100 days. This was his response.
Lee says, what's the biggest mistake you think you've made in the first 100 days?
I'll tell you, that's the toughest question I can have because I don't really believe I've made mistakes.
You made any mistakes?
We're in a transition period. We're in a transition period.
Yeah, you can tell this interview, like most interviews Trump did, was a complete disaster. I mean, he gave a bunch of half-baked non-answers. It was honestly embarrassing, but it's not nearly as embarrassing as the moment you've been waiting for. That's right, Stephen A. Smith confronted Donald Trump on live TV, and it left him panicking.
Mr. President, thank you for your time. It's interesting that you brought up Harvard, because when people think about Harvard, what they're basically talking about is they're asking, what do you say to those who view your actions as an attack on academic freedom rather than a defense of fairness? What do you say to that?
Well, I say this: we had riots in Harlem, in Harlem, and frankly, if you look at what's gone on, and people from Harlem went up and they protested, Stephen, and they protested very strongly against Harvard. They happened to be on my side. You know, I got a very high black vote. You know that. Very, very high black vote. It was a very great compliment to me. I did criminal justice reform. I did opportunity zones for one of the greatest economic deals ever for the black and Hispanic community. I got tremendous. They agree with what I'm doing with respect to Harvard. Harvard gets.
Trump claimed he didn't make any more mistakes. Well, apparently going on this interview was a mistake. Did Trump just give some vague, broad answer because he knows he's talking to a black person? I mean, that's what it sounded like. He didn't really answer the question. He was stumbling all over his words. Donald Trump's brain is like an old Nintendo game that you have to blow all the dust out of before it can even begin to work. So long story short, Trump completely blundered yet another interview. And even worse, he was left panicking after a very reasonable question from Stephen A. Smith. Trump, brace yourself, because I think you're going to be left panicking a lot more during this term.